Welcome back to 1501. My guest on this episode is Ben Curtis. Now, if that name doesn't sound familiar, I bet you heard his catchphrase during the early 2000s. Dude, you're getting a Dell. Yeah, he's that guy. He was the face of Dell Computers for 3 years, and it all ended abruptly because Ben fell on some dark times, and it kind of booted him out of the whole acting industry. We're going to talk to him about what happened, how he fought back, and how that he is better than ever. He's acting again. He's helping men. He's got a podcast. He's doing all kinds of cool retreats. He's playing music. We're going to learn all about his story up until today. It's Ben Curtis on 1501. They say everyone gets their 15 minutes of fame, but what happens when that time is up? Some burn out, some find ways to extend that fame, while others find success in completely different ventures. My name is Derek Spartz. Join me as I talk with actors, musicians, viral sensations, athletes, and more to find out what drove them to this crazy world of fame and fortune, along with some tales of misfortune along the way. This is 1501. Dude, it's Ben Curtis on the other end. Thank you so much for your time on 1501. Appreciate you coming on the show.
Dude, Derek, it is a pleasure. I'm so happy to be here. Thank you for having me.
I can tell we're already going to get along because before we even started this episode, we had tech issues. I'm known for having all kinds of tech issues. No matter how prepared I am, something goes wrong. And secondly, I'm very injury prone, and you rolled into the camera turned on and you're in a sling in your arm. What happened?
Woohoo! Yeah, and I want to talk about this in just a minute after I share my injury. But what happened is I was snowboarding this past weekend, and I took a very hard fall at the end. And of course, it was at the very last run at the bottom, face planted. And
it's better than happening on the first run. I mean,
that's true. Well, I decided, so I host a guitar immersion experience once a year in Costa Rica or Brazil. And we teach mindfulness to musicians, guitar, yoga, and surfing. So for the last 10 years, I've been taking people to incredible places working in music through healing. And I got to be a really good surfer recently. And so I promised myself this past January, I was sitting on a wave in Nosara, Costa Rica, watching the sunset over the ocean. And I promised myself as I went back home to Rhinebeck, New York, in the Hudson Valley near Woodstock, and we were going to get feet of snow this winter. And we did that. I would enjoy my winter. So my wife and I don't have kids yet, but we bought 2 sleds, one that fits both of us and one that fits one of us.
I can get down with sledding. I can't do snowboarding because I would look like you look right now after every time I went.
Well, consider what if you didn't? So what I started creating are the conditions for safety and fun. And I took lessons and I covered myself in pads that actually probably most snowboarders should wear. As we actually start to think about these things, and I watch videos about the surfing, World Surf League and snowboard videos and things, always studying and learning. What I enjoy and what I've started to realize from the other side, watching other people, is these are extreme sports. And what's made me such a great snowboarder lately is that I've actually been training my body on my off days. So I rest, I nurse my body, I stretch my body in certain ways. I practice on a balance board on my days off. Like, I've gotten really, really into taking this on, and it all brings more fun in my life. My friends make a joke that because I live across the street from a hospital, and they're all like, oh, now we know why you moved there. I've been there 4 times this year. I broke my other wrist skateboarding last year.
Oh,
and my
man.
friends are like, stop doing these things. And I said, why? I'm not going to stop living life. I'm just going to learn how to do it more and more safely.
Right.
So wrist guards weren't there.
I live on Venice Beach, so we're all about skateboarding and surfing.
Oh, hell yeah.
I'm a horrible surfer. I'll admit it, first of all. I could practice to get better. I do skate, but I'm smart enough not to do tricks. I'll skate around town, but I don't think I'm going to be jumping in the bowl anytime soon.
There you go. Well, with snowboarding, take it really easy if you ever learn it. I was doing some jumps, and that's not actually where I injured myself. Those all landed well. It was on the flat parts.
Of course.
So it was the second my mind wandered. I got slammed. and it's about being present. So it's a lesson in that. And I'm, as we talk more, I'm a big believer in embodying your work and getting present and going out in nature and challenging your body and mind.
That's why I think that surfing, I'm not very good at it, but I enjoy that. I also had the same feeling when I owned a motorcycle. When you're doing it in the moment, that's the only thing you're thinking about. You're not thinking about anything else, any kind of stress, any kind of work. Like you have to focus on doing that task or you'll fall off.
Yeah. And you said you're not very good at it. You're not very good at it yet. Like most people tell me I suck at guitar. Like, right. Well, how long have you been practicing, walking? And then how long have you been practicing guitar? So everyone sucks when they're learning guitar. When I've been out in the middle of surfing and some great waves and suddenly I'm feeling great. And suddenly I look around and the waves have suddenly gotten 3 feet higher. And I actually chose not to take a wave, but instead a wave took me, broke my board in half, and I was instantly stuck between 2 giant waves with a piece of foam attached to me, which actually pulled me further under. And I had to make a choice. And so I released it. I held on to it. And I remembered my meditating for a second. And I remembered watching the 100-foot wave with Garrett McNamara. It's a great Netflix series about this wave in Nazaré, Spain, the 100-foot wave. And how these surfers are preparing themselves mentally and physically year round. Because when that moment comes, I thought, oh, Ben, you're literally freaking out. Your nervous system is in fight or flight. Breathe. Can you calm yourself for one moment? I took a deep breath. I went under, and then the next wave passed, and I was able to start to get myself in. I had to keep recalming myself, recalming. And eventually I made my way in. Had I panicked, I could have died.
Yeah, it's funny that in those high stress situations, the calmer you are, usually the better it turns out. So you're really focused on your mind lately. You've really used it as a tool to help others as well. Was that always the case? I want to hear about how you grew up. You mentioned your father. Sorry to hear he recently passed away. What was childhood like for you?
Thanks for that question. The space is really cool, and you're a great listener. So I just want to say thank you. It's great to be on the show. I grew up in Chattanooga, Tennessee. My parents were a school teacher and a minister. However, my mom taught French, so she traveled a lot, which is rare for a Southerner. My father was a progressive Democrat, which is rare for a Southerner.
Yeah, seems like a pretty worldly family for Chattanooga.
Very. He built himself up from nothing and built churches from nothing. And he was Episcopalian, which ended up being one of the first Christian denominations to welcome all people, despite race, gender, sexuality, even ordain all kinds of people. And it almost divided the church. And so I grew up, basically, my father every Sunday went to church. I actually went to a really cool kind of progressive private elementary school that was in that church. It was, we all learned at our own pace, sort of Waldorf style. Mm-hmm. But what was interesting is there's a lot of different kids there, like Indian, Chinese, Jewish, and we celebrated, even in this chapel, each one of their holidays and religious holidays. And we learned about each other's. So that was really cool. My dad encouraged me to go to synagogue growing up with my best friends up the street. And then I noticed we lived at the top of a hill, but at the bottom of the hill were all poor Black people. And at the top were all rich white people. My family was very middle class, though, but we had a modest living. And I learned to be of service. Also, I think I learned that in order to do what you love, you couldn't make money. My dad said, oh, if I wanted to make money, I wouldn't have become a minister. I somehow made up that I couldn't have help people and serve. And I went to a school of highly privileged, necktie, very conservative, very narrow-minded, very egotistical, and just extreme wealth, who just judged everyone else. And it just was everything against what I stood for. And it was really interesting to be raised in that environment and have parents that stood for one thing. My father then came out is gay and bisexual and then gay. And he was going through a process of dealing with sexual abuse from his childhood. And he spoke about this. My family was in therapy. So I was in therapy since a young age.
Sure.
So like I also was walking around talking about my feelings. I mean, dude, I could not have been more of a black sheep. Oh, and I was the only white kid in an all black baseball league, which I loved. My best friend was black growing up, and that was rare then. Like that was a thing. I even say it like my best friend was black. I don't want to say like my best friend because it was a thing then in the 80s.
Sure.
In Tennessee.
So did that feeling of standing out make you kind of get on the performance front? I mean, if your father's a minister, he's essentially performing on stage in front of a crowd every weekend, every day, whatever it may be. Did seeing that kind of inspire you? And then also the fact that you're different than everyone else. And I know a lot of ways that kids will try to maybe get attention or differentiate themselves is, through comedy, performance, things of that matter. Is that something that drove you to do these things?
100%. Also, my mom said that like she had a memory of, and I remember her like crying in the bathtub, and I was 4, and I came over to try to make her laugh. Like my parents were fighting again. There was a lot of tumultuous fighting. We looked great on the outside, but what my parents really had, what was going on was codependency, addiction to like food and fantasy. My mom was in a marriage she thought she should be in, but didn't actually love my father. And my father was trying to be in a marriage he thought he should be in, and he loved my mother, but he actually was repressing a large part of himself. So that was present. My mother's father committed suicide. So she was angry at men my whole life. And yet I had all these feelings to talk about. So it made me stand out. It was very challenging. Like women were not into an emotional, sensitive dude then. It made me a great songwriter. I absolutely demanded being the center of attention because it felt like no one else in my family was going to do anything. So I was throwing fits. I became physically violent at times. I became a performer. I met David Copperfield when I was 4, and he invited me to be in his illusion. I was too shy, but I watched another kid do it.
Is that where the magic came in? Because I saw you were really into magic, and you did very well, I could see too.
Yes, I did. Yeah, I'm an award-winning magician, and David invited me. I saw this other kid, and I remember it from 4 years old, 1984, watching this kid in a huge auditorium and beautiful women dancing around him, and I was like, F that kid, My parents got me a magic kit, and that gave me something to put it into. Of course, watching my dad, extremely charismatic man, speaking to the masses, and like quite a ladies' man at that, like because he was so charismatic and sensitive, women loved him. So it was very confusing when my father's identity changed in the middle of puberty for me, when I was looking at him as a sexual identity figure.
And so when you're younger, you're doing these magic shows. I think you even won some national shows doing magic. At what point did you think this could be my escape out? It sounds like home life wasn't fantastic. You probably wanted to get out of Tennessee and branch out. You eventually got to New York, but you were still very young. And you got a scholarship at NYU. That is not an easy place to get a scholarship to. So I want to know at what point did you realize this could really be something? And then how did it lead you to getting a scholarship to NYU?
It's a great question. So when I was, so I had a magic kit. I'd been performing some. I even remember, do you know who Steve Avery is? He was the pitcher of the Braves.
Okay, that name sounds familiar.
I was a big fan of the Braves in the 80s or 90s. I'm not sure when you were born, but when baseball cards, like it was sort of the end of the era of baseball cards.
I had baseball cards. I'm a few years younger than you, but I still had plenty of baseball cards.
So they were valuable. And I did something that you don't do, which is that it actually devalues a card to have it signed on occasion. But also it can value it. So Steve Avery was a rookie. He became one of the greatest pitchers of all time with like John Smoltz and like all those guys from the Braves back in the day. They all got traded since then.
Like Maddox and all them. And
yeah, exactly. They had just the most incredible team ever. The Braves were crushing it. It was the only Tennessee didn't have a professional football team.
Yep.
So
no hockey team. Yeah, I think that was about it.
So I got Steve Avery to sign this card in person. I met him. Anyway, so I had that friend, and he had a magic kit, and he convinced me to trade He was done with it. Trade him the card for the magic kit. I did. And then someone asked me to do a birthday party. And I was like, oh, that's a cool idea.
And,
I
and
think
you're
I
like
was
13 at this point?
yeah,
Okay,
yeah.
cool.
And I heard that this other kid at my school had done it. And so I got paid to do that. I had my friend be an assistant. And then this guy at my school, his name was Matthew Saul, and he had been like kind of an accomplished teenage magician, sort of. And he started a magic club. And I learned there was a magic club in town, and he had like a coach. So at age 13, I asked my dad to like if he would help get me a teacher. And so basically I hired my first coach at age 13. I mean, aside from all my sports coaches, like this guy took me under his wing. He said, I won't teach you any secrets, but I'm going to help you work on what you already do and make it better. So we brought amazing theatricality to it. He really helped bring myself to life. He really coached me. It was a really incredible because he didn't enable me. That's like what he meant by I'm not just going to give this away to you.
Sure.
I mean, he was a double for David Copperfield. So I learned some cool things, but like that's part of the secrecy. You get to earn that. And the more, and I studied this, like we didn't have the internet till I was like 13. We were doing dial up and stuff, you know?
Yeah, that's wild. Yeah, both you and I are of the same generation where, you know, we had part of our lives growing up with no computers, and then we went to the internet age and it changed everything. But now kids,
we had computers, but it was only for like typing and like digital box games, like you know,
with
where
the apples with the green screens and the
Apple IIe and the printers with the hole punch on the side. It's like that's the whole thing. That's all we had, right? It was.
How does that get you to NYU? That is a very prestigious school.
So what started happening is I suddenly became president of the Magic Club. I hired a coach. I started learning about competitions around Tennessee. I started traveling and competing. I started making a lot of money. My mom's like, you need to, you know, my mom was the safe one with money. You need to get a real job and bag groceries. And I'm like, for $5 an hour, I'm making 150 in 1 hour right now. Like, and then I don't have to work all week. I was paying my own car insurance. And I was developing confidence. Senior year, I produced a full-scale illusion show, and I sold out this place in town.
Oh, wow.
And it included theater and magic and storytelling and guitar and music that I wrote. I was in bands. I was a singer-songwriter, and it became clear. And I played soccer year-round, and it was going to be soccer or acting.
Okay.
And my junior year, we lost the state finals by like one shot. And my senior year, I decided I was going to audition for the musical and quit the soccer team, and they weren't going to start me. Well, of course, that year the soccer team won state. And not
did you take that as a sign as like maybe I'm the one that shouldn't have been there?
I don't know. I just took it as like the worst year to not be on the team.
Right.
I didn't take it personally. But what happened is I was in final callbacks for the lead role of this musical. It's called Little Abner. And not only did I not get the lead role, which the assistant director is like, well, obviously Ben's going to get it. The director is like, well, obviously Paul's going to get it. What? And they had an artistic difference, and he gave it to this other kid. And it was like the biggest ego crush I've ever had. I wept. I had to it was really intense. And not only did I not get a lead role, I got like a tiny chorus part.
To be the age you were and you're selling out shows at a theater on your own, and then to go to a musical and be like, I got this, you know, I can sell out a whole theater full, and then to get rejected like that, I could totally understand that.
My senior year, I was 18 at an all-boys school, and I quit the sports team who won, and then I didn't get crap in this musical. I did get a girlfriend. I did get experience, and I got my first taste of what the industry is like. That just because someone doesn't give you the opportunity doesn't mean it's about you.
Sure.
So what I got is it wasn't about me. It wasn't about talents. It gave me a really good eye. And I became clear I wanted to perform. And everyone told me, including the coach I had, Scott Fillers, my magic coach, said, listen, even if you don't get into NYU, go to New York. Like, it's incredible. There were some famous actors that had moved back to Chattanooga. Their friend Leslie Jordan, he's a comedic actor that was in a bunch of stuff growing up.
He just passed away
he's
recently,
from Chattanooga.
right?
I don't think so.
Oh, sorry. Am I
Unless I
thinking of
didn't
someone
hear
else?
about it. Maybe I'll ask. The guy that played Mr. Belding from Saved by the Bell,
Yeah.
Mr. Belvedere.
Leslie Jordan did, sorry
Oh,
to
he
break the
did?
news, but he had a car accident a few months back in Los Angeles. He had a heart attack and crashed into like a building. Yeah.
Oh my
Yeah, it
God.
was a
I
pretty big
didn't know
story. I was
that.
like, I remember that happening. Sorry to break the
Oh my
bad news to
God.
you, but
Wow. Yeah, I've been trying to get him on my podcast
oh,
and
yeah, that's the reason he isn't answering your emails.
God.
Sorry.
Well, this was a year ago,
Okay.
but
Yeah.
I should reach out to his friends. I'm so sorry to hear that. He is an amazing human. And
Yeah. Back in
yeah, so Mr.
October.
Dennis Lloyd, who I believe his name is, who played
Mr. Belding?
Dennis
you said?
Haskins.
Or Dennis Haskins is
Yeah.
it? Yes. I watched enough Saved by the Bell to remember that name.
Yeah. So we know each other. Samuel L. Jackson doesn't talk about it. He's from Chattanooga. Usher's
cool.
from Chattanooga, Tennessee.
Oh, wow. Yeah. You guys got quite a roster there.
Yeah, there's some people from Chattanooga, and Chattanooga was not the hip place to live back then, but now it is one of the most amazing places on the planet, and people are moving from LA there.
Oh yeah, it's like Florida, Tennessee, Texas. Those are the kind of big three everyone's jumping to.
The low real estate taxes, but guess what? Now they're all high again.
Exactly.
So you've
Yeah.
all priced everyone out again. I can't even move back home.
I've been waiting for enough people to get out of LA so I can afford it, but they're not moving out fast enough.
So long story short, it really became clear I wanted to be in New York, and my father just knew we couldn't afford NYU, but I auditioned anyway. He didn't have the heart to tell me we couldn't afford it. And I applied to some other schools. I looked at Georgia. Everyone who's there was going to other schools up north. And I got it. And I also got in academically, which was pretty amazing for me because I had a learning, like I had some issues like learning and the learning styles of school. You know, you may say you have a learning disability, but what I've learned now is we're all taught to study a certain way and not all of our brains work that way. So if you didn't have good grades, it actually doesn't mean anything about your intelligence. It just means like your style of learning doesn't match that structure. So I looked at education differently. And I saw an opportunity. I got into the school and we couldn't afford it. And they ended up, so we let them know. And then they ended up coming back offering me an acting scholarship.
That's
and
amazing.
It still wasn't enough. So we made it work. I just took on the loans. My dad and I took out another $40,000 or whatever. And now the school's tripled. And I went back 10 years later and I went into 60,000. It was 30,000 a year. Then it became 60,000.
Crazy.
I was in debt from that. But I got into the school. I went to New York. I took it so seriously. I was banging on agents' doors the second year in. I had an agent year two, and they're like, don't get an agent. You'll have to, can't focus on school. I'm like, this is going to take years. I'm starting now. No way.
That's what I want to ask you. Was the school actively helping you, book auditions, do roles and things like that? Because my experience with college, I went for film, and it was almost like a cattle system. They're like, get them in, get them out. You're on your own after that. Was that
not only did we not need a single film student, right? Unless you tried. Luckily, I was friends with one and lived with one. And so I was like pulled for that. But like, why aren't we working together? Right. Yeah. Probably acted in most of your filmmakers' films like for each other rather than working with the actors sometimes. That was a big missing. There's no business of acting schools. You get out and then you could be so talented, have no idea how to survive. You have zero marketing, zero branding, any of that, which is what is 90% of acting. I hate to break it to you. The other part's just listening and being present and getting to know yourself. They did not encourage auditioning at all. No, they were not supportive of that. And
that's interesting.
Because it could compete with you being present in school. And, it started to, as I got success at kind of right away, it started to affect that. And I couldn't be available for auditions all the time. And it did start to affect school. I mean, they do have you can like audition for an agent showcase at the end or something, but at that point I already had an agent. Yeah,
you were already 10 steps ahead of everyone else. So I think you took the right approach. Now you would go on to book the Dell commercials while you were in NYU. Were you getting anything before that, or was that really the first thing that everyone was like, whoa, this is something substantial here?
Yeah, I did get a couple things before that. And actually, someone just randomly sent it online to me, like, is this you? And it was my first ever acting job. I've got to find this again.
Oh,
I think
nice.
I
Is it on YouTube or
downloaded it.
something? I swear everything's on YouTube.
Yeah, it's like
We got to
this
find it.
entertainment kids school competition, make your own video thing. And I'm the host talking about what they should do.
Oh, nice.
I did some modeling, like print jobs before, and then I got one or two other small things. But one of the first auditions I had, I was freelancing with my manager, Renata English, and she was sending me out through some different agents. And because my best friend's mom knew her and was sending him out for auditions, and he was in business school. And I was like, dude, hook me up. I'm the actor here.
Right?
Come on.
I'm
And
the
so he
talented
did.
one here.
Well, I booked my first role. She sent me on background thing first just to make sure I'd show up and be professional. And I was. She was impressed. She sent me on other things. And within a month, I had an audition for the Dell commercial. And I was the only kid there without my mom. I was 19. The
Within a
kids were
month
12.
of having an agent, you went to the
Yeah.
casting for the Dell commercials. Okay.
With her, yeah.
Wow. Very cool. So what was the casting process like for this? I read that they were looking for a teenager, and at that time you were already 20 years old. Was there any, I mean, you're a very young looking guy. You still look very young. I mean,
Well,
I don't see
thank
that
you.
as an issue, but sometimes they're like, we're looking for a 12-year-old, and 12 and 20 is a little bit different.
Yeah, but if I started to talk like this and if I made myself younger and I was like quirky, like I immediately think I was younger.
Sure.
So I was 19. The audition call was for 12 to 17-year-olds. It's the only guy there without my mom. It's legally you had to have a guardian, right? And I think, I was good at manipulating my parents. I was business savvy growing up. They said I had all these yard sales and I was always upgrading my stuff. And I loved the business marketing, like putting ads in the paper. My dad helped and I developed that as a magician. That's something I kind of skipped over. I really like.
I mean, obviously, if you're selling out theaters at 18, you had some business savvy.
Yeah. I knew how to talk to the press. I was like developing materials, promotional materials. Oh, and then I forgot to mention from my friend Matthew Saul, also learned about Tannen's School of Magic, which was basically like a week of magic camp in New York and based on Tannen's magic shop in New York City. And we got to study with some of the greatest magicians all day long. And I won competitions. And I learned business classes there for magic, marketing classes.
I've spoken to a couple of magicians, and it seems like kind of a tight-knit world. Like a
It's
lot
a
of you guys know
small
each other.
world.
Yeah.
It's very small. And they're all so catty and competitive. It's hilarious.
My magic's better than yours.
Yeah. I used comedy in mine. I used a lot of stand-up comedy and characters. And I have had a lot of, I do it in my band, like on stage. And we do a really incredible song. Our band, Dirty May, like M-A-E.
Okay.
We do a great cover of White Rabbit by Jefferson Airplane.
Yep.
And on stage, I'm sometimes known to surprise the audience with some magic during the extra trippy parts.
All right.
We'll do some bigs.
I need you to think of a really good trick you can do. We'll save it till the end, but I need to see at least one trick before we get out of here.
Okay, we do have to remember I have only one hand right now,
All right.
so we'll see what.
I feel
I'm
like
sure
a
I can come
magician
up with
could still
something.
make it happen.
Okay, all right.
Let's talk about, you went to the casting for the Dell commercials. Was this initially thought out to be like a long-term campaign like it ended up to be, or were you just going for a single commercial?
It was a one-off. Yeah, they had no idea. I don't think any of us knew how successful it would be. It was really cool. And then suddenly they won another one and then another one. And then I was like, why am I getting so much attention? And people were like, you don't know you're on TV all the time. I'm like, not really. And then got a contract for 3 of them and a print ad and a voiceover and 2 personal appearances and then another one. And I was making a lot of money.
So I'm just curious if you could break down how you would have got paid for these commercials. Even then, from 2000 to 2003, you were the spokesperson for Dell. I believe it works out that you get residuals each time a commercial airs. So not only do you get paid for the initial acting in the commercial, but you'll continue to get paid as long as that continues to air. I know it's changed today with, streaming, social media outlets that didn't exist, but this was a time when the internet was starting to come aboard with web pages and digital media, as crude as it was then compared to today. Those things were coming in too. So can you just break down how you would have got paid for these campaigns?
Yeah, yes, thank you. That's a great question. So normally what would happen is for actors, you could have a great career, whether you're a soap star. I mean, TV was one of the highest paying gigs. That's why a lot of people did soaps and commercials and things, because it would be the amount of money you'd get for the amount of time you're filming was great, especially for commercials. It's a one-off. You get paid up front. If it does well, they'll renew it, and you get a renewal fee, plus you get some type of money. I can't remember the exact amount every time it airs. And there's a company that keeps track of that through your member ID. And ideally, that's why you have a union to protect you. If you're a union member, which costs a few $1,000s to join the Screen Actors Guild, but once you're a commercial, you do a commercial. If it's a unionized commercial, you're actually what at some point called a must join. You have to become unionized. You can no longer do union work, which counts out a lot of opportunities. However, the opportunity of a union obviously is protection, benefits.
Yeah, I've heard everyone that joins SAG-AFTRA, like, you got to get the health insurance. You got to get it. It's great.
Yeah, but you have to earn $60,000 a year or more
to qualify
certain things to qualify.
Okay.
And it has to add up. So you don't always qualify. You qualify when you're making money and you could actually afford your own insurance. You don't qualify when you're not making money and you can't afford it. So it really doesn't help artists in that sense. You said something about new media in this age of the internet. So what started to happen was buyouts. These things called buyouts, and they became illegal, and the union had to stop producers from negotiating this. It was great for producers because they could just give you $10,000 for their commercial and run it as long as they wanted to.
Right. That's what I was going to ask, because I feel like things have changed since then in certain aspects.
I don't know how it works. I've just started auditioning for on camera again after the pandemic. It was really slow. I've done mostly voiceovers and public speaking and theater and things. But what I experienced is I was paid a large sum up front. It was less than six figures. It would include 6 commercials, 3 personal appearances, 2 voiceovers, and something else, a print ad. And so that was kind of a buyout. And they said some of that included residuals up to a certain point. So sometimes I got residual checks on top of that. But like, honestly, it was just very overwhelming. That time.
I can imagine. I mean,
I was 19, 20, 21. I just started. It was exploding. Yeah. And I just could barely hold on. And I was in one of the most prestigious, demanding acting programs in the country. So it was just not, and academically.
Is that weird walking in a class for an acting class and everyone knows who you are already because they've seen you acting?
It's weird being resented by everyone in your acting class for doing well in acting field. Even your friends. And it became uncomfortable for some of my friends. Like, people would harass me, and I try to look at my friends for support. They're like, nah, dude, it was hard for girlfriends. It changed relationships, how people treated me. I got treated more. I noticed society starting to treat me actually more as a product, a character than a human. That was interesting to watch. And then the other thing is that September 11th happened during that time. I just moved out of the dorms and into my first adult apartment, and I moved into what became Ground Zero. I wanted to ask you about this.
Your place was located very close to the World Trade Center, correct?
Yeah, that's correct.
That's a year into the Dell campaign. You're at the pretty much the height of what you're doing. You're making some money. Obviously, it's not cheap to live down there. And do you want to maybe briefly go over what happened that day that you can remember?
Yeah, I remember every detail. I was hungover as usual because at that point my career was blowing up so much I couldn't hold on. I didn't have great self-care, and I started turning to drugs and alcohol to help deal with that, to cope. So I was hungover, and I was late for a class, and it was actually my journalism class, oddly enough. And that woke up to my roommate yelling and saying, "There's this explosion outside. Come look." We had a direct view of the South Tower. So imagine my head was the South Tower, but the North is right behind it, but you just couldn't see it because it was perfectly hidden where a building or window was.
Was the North the first one hit?
Yeah, the North was the first one hit. So Yeah, so all we saw was like these papers and smoke, and I was like, "Well, that looks like some gas explosion." And he's like, "I'm gonna go check it out." And he like went down there with his
Oh,
camera, and I went back to sleep because I was still like,
yeah, sure.
Then my eyes opened in my bed. I could see the South Tower from my bed. I watched it explode,
Oh, yeah.
and I thought my roommate was dead. Of course, I couldn't get hold of him. I thought I would die. You don't know how to do this in the movies. I went down the street. I was in flip flops. I had a broken toe from a soccer game. And then suddenly it started to collapse. It was like a stampede. No one knew what to do. It literally felt like inside of a movie.
Oh,
And
yeah, I can imagine.
we just went underground in the subway across the street. I was trampled at one point. I was told to go underground and filled with debris immediately. There was people yelling to take off our shirts and cover our faces, though, which we did. And then there's people yelling this way. And so we ended up in a stairwell. I ended up treating, I'm an Eagle Scout. I had a lot of good first aid training growing up. I treated a woman for first aid. It kicked in for shock. She was an old lady with a bad wound, and treated her for shock. Then we ended up in a bank that was closed, and we broke the doors open, and it was like the apocalypse outside, like covered in ash, bodies around, running. I tried to get into an NYU dorm. Everyone's leaving. The phones don't work. And this guy's like, there's a bus, and he's like, hop on.
Yeah.
I'm like, where are you going? He's like, uptown. Get
Right.
on.
Yeah. One good thing that came out of that is everyone did kind of come together and help each other out, which New York is not known for. And then on that day, though, it really showed that people will come together and help each other out.
Yeah, and that's what I'm about to point to. I went up, we were going on the bus, and just people really came together. It's incredible. And I'm just crying and covered in ash. And I say, to the driver, can you stop here at Union Square? That's where all my friends lived in their dorms. And he was like, I'm not stopping for nobody.
Right.
He's like, wait a second. Are you the Dell dude? I'm like, not right now, man. And he's like, I love your commercials. Sure, buddy. You can do it out wherever you want.
Well, it worked out that way. You got a free taxi ride for the day.
Oh my God. So that happened to me a lot in my life, like angels.
Sure.
And would you know it that like 3 hours later, my roommate showed up at this random friend's dorm room. We like magically found each other. We were both alive.
Yeah.
And we magically ended up at the same place 40 blocks north. Like, what?
Yeah.
We had a lot of friends. It was like, is this odd or God? And after that moment, that was my backyard. I had to close the windows to have parties. I remember like a Coke dealer coming at 5 a.m. and then I heard the bell ring, and I looked up and I saw this cross on top of the church. And this church is at the corner of Rector and Broadway. It's the only reason our building stood was this church. And I felt like the presence of a higher power. And that was a beginning. That was my first of many wake-up calls on a path of sobriety, but I didn't get sober for another 10 years. So it actually got darker before it got better. But 9/11, I got to deal with PTSD. I got to deal with substance abuse, and I got to learn like sobriety and self-care, and like have a whole new life. My band took off. I met my wife. I really I have a successful acting career, music career, and coaching career. Now I coach individuals, and we're working with global companies now, an executive leadership coaching program I have. So, I'm really out to make a difference, mostly from the world of wellness.
So I'm so glad you're on your sober journey and everything worked out in the end. Now, can we go back to your arrest in 2003? Because I think I have a little bit different take on what happened there. Was obviously you know what happened. From what I've read, you got arrested in New York City for possession of marijuana. Is that correct?
That's correct.
So here's my thing. The world was different 20 years ago. I've been
arrested 3 times, actually. That was the first time. The public doesn't know about the other 2 yet.
My question is, I live in Los Angeles. Like I said, I pass by 50 people a day smoking marijuana. It's not a big deal. I know it was definitely different back then. Does it feel a little I know you said you had problems beyond that. Do you feel a little jaded that had this happened today, it would have been nothing?
No, no. I was out of integrity with myself in those moments. I learned a great lesson. I wouldn't trade it actually for the world at this point. It's really weird. I've never felt that before. And I don't think I've ever said that out loud, because there's so many times when I'm like, why didn't I just move to LA when everyone told me to, and I would have been so famous. But the truth is, like, my soul, I think, needed to go through this to become the healer, the human. Like, I've got more tools than ever, and not just to help other people, but to really, like, I learned how to fall in love with myself. I did not love myself at all back then. And there's a great quote by Jim Carrey that says, I wish everyone could just get rich and famous and have everything they want, so that they know that it's not the answer.
Mm-hmm.
And I had all of that. I made 6 figures a year. I was flying my girlfriends and friends around the country and lived in a fancy apartment in New York. And I wanted to kill myself. And it's because I just didn't have self-care. That was it. That was all that was missing, was someone in my corner to look after me. But instead I was being pushed. And that's what happens in businesses and society, in families and relationships. So if we can put self-care in, like, I've never regretted those lessons. I have such brilliant stories and theater and art and healings and teachings from that. And I actually now believe, even after losing my father and being in some of the darkest times of my life, I'm living one of the happiest times of my life. And I've been through major loss. We had a miscarriage this year. I broke my arm twice this year, and I'm a guitarist. We had my father died, our grandmother died, like, just a lot of things were, there's always grief around. But I think as a society post-pandemic, we're tuning in to, like, I see grief as part of the beauty. And if we can not hide from that stuff, but actually learn from it and embrace it, it actually, for me, has made my heart fuller and bigger. I live an even greater life now as a result.
So obviously you can cope with, issues and trauma in your life a lot better today. But 20 years ago, it seems like Dell or the ad agency or whoever it may be acted very swiftly, and they just cut it off right away. How did you take that? What was it? Were you like, okay, that's fine, I'll get something else, I'll jump into everything else? Or did you just take a break? And then when you did try to get into other roles, what was the reaction from casting directors?
Thank you for asking that question, Derek. I was pissed. Yes, I signed a contract, like a no drug policy back then. So they said they're, treating me equally, and sure, trying to, like, I was a household name, but so was, like, Michael Phelps. And it's like,
sure.
Really? Like, it wasn't like I was a drug dealer. Like, I got caught buying some cannabis. Now, I will say I was arrested in a kilt with no underwear on.
Well, that's the only way to wear a kilt, right?
Exactly. Well, if you're a proper Scottishman, yes. And my girlfriend from Scotland was visiting. We were at my best friend's birthday in the Lower East Side.
So it started off as a good day.
Yeah, since cannabis was legalized, I have smoked a joint on that location as part of my healing.
Okay.
Someone might have it on film, I'm not sure, but I decided that was for me. I've integrated slowly plant medicine on occasion in my life, but I still, like, live a pretty, like, sober life. And I haven't drank in 11 years or used any other narcotics or drugs. And I just got to, I was so pissed when that happened, because first of all, everyone in the industry, smokes pot. I had to say no, even when I was using it all the time. The amount of times I had to say no to drugs.
Oh yeah, that's
in that industry.
And putting that in the contract, I mean, of course, you're just going to sign it, and that's the way the industry is. It reminds me, since you brought it up earlier, you brought up Mr. Belding from Saved by the Bell. Do you remember there was a Saved by the Bell episode where they were shooting, like, a PSA to not do drugs, and then this actor came in and he's, like, smoking a joint or something. He's like, everybody does it, and it reminded me of that. The guy who's smoking weed is doing a don't smoke weed commercial. So
Yeah, exactly. And when I was in jail, like prison for the weekend, like don't get arrested on a weekend. That's
You're
another rule of
stuck.
thumb.
Yeah.
Oh my God. And I had some pretty amazing experiences. I talked to a man under there. I had police taunt me. I actually play an officer in my one-man show, taunting myself. I wasn't treated very kindly by them, but one officer was kind enough to let me know that there's a bunch of press outside. And then the agency sent a lawyer to get me out. And they're like, they're not upset. They just want you to be safe. And then he sent me like a $3,000 bill just for like my slap on the wrist. But he did guide me out. There's a lot of cameras. It's really
I mean,
intimidating. There's paparazzi at my apartment. And then everyone, let me just say this, all the dealers around New York City came out like, why didn't you tell me? I would have given you weed. I'm like, well, it's too late now, bucko.
You know what's crazy is I just did a Google search on this later. This is 20 years after the fact, and there's still a ton of articles out there, even 20 years later on the internet. So I can only imagine at the time, just the amount of press around that had been insane.
Oh, it was on CNN headline news while I was still behind bars. Dude, you're getting a cell. The infamous Dell Computer.
Oh, there's always
some
pun in there where they had to drop a dude in there, of course.
Yeah, I actually have.
I think I read an LA Times article and it said the first line was, "Dude, you're busted."
Nice. Well, I have the original. I'm holding the original article clipping.
Oh, wow.
Here. It says, "Dude, you're getting a cell," and so that's.
That one's more witty. I like that one better. Dude, you're getting a cell.
Yeah, it's great. And so that's kind of how I started my podcast. Dude, you're getting well. As I started turning my life around. But to answer your question about the acting industry, I got totally blacklisted. My agency dropped me. They stopped talking to me. I didn't get sent out for anything. I was like the hottest, like Steven Spielberg had called my manager to talk about creating a project for me, with me. I mean, that I regret. On
your contracts that you had to sign for Dell, was that an exclusive? As far as commercials, I would assume you couldn't do any other commercials. Were you free to do movies and TV shows, or did you have to stick to the Dell stuff?
Well, another thing about the commercial business, you actually are free to do any commercials. You just can't do any commercials that compete in that industry.
Oh, gotcha.
I couldn't do any other technology or computer or software related commercials. So I could have maybe done something for like Heinz Ketchup.
Sure.
So you'll start to see movie stars and actors across a lot of different commercials because that's what starts happening. They get one of each.
Interesting.
And I didn't get work, but this one guy called me. He put me in this commercial for Games and Flicks, which was a competitor of Netflix. He said, my son smoked pot in high school and got in trouble. I don't give a crap if you did. You're the star of our commercial. Then I booked my first lead role in a feature film, Spy the Movie. I was the lead with Vinny Pastore and Frank Vincent from Goodfellas. And that was just the beginning. And I've done tons of work since then, but I did it all on my own until I proved that to agents that, I was better than ever. And that's been the thing, is like showing the industry, like, are you ready to actually have an even better person now? Because I'm not the fresh thing anymore, but I've worked more than most people will ever know.
And I think even if you didn't get in trouble, you would have ran, let's say the campaign just ran its course naturally soon after that. I think you would have still been typecast as that guy from Dell. I think you would have had the same problem no matter what.
I was worried about being typecasted back then, and that was something that I do regret. I met Susan Sarandon, who once told me, like, you should milk typecasting for as much as you can, because if you're getting work and they think you're one thing and you do that well, you ride that as long as you can. But at the time, I really wanted to be taken seriously, and I was dealing with my ego around that. And the truth is, I just wasn't well, and I needed it to stop so I could get better. And no one would acknowledge that. And I couldn't tell them. I was like cries for help without saying it. I just kept getting yelled at, which shame doesn't help shame, right? If there's anything I could teach anyone today, if you're listening, like, that's why they say positive reinforcement works well with dogs and children, because punishment can work for a certain point, but at some point you start teaching shame, and then shame creates more shame, and then it creates sneaky behavior. So what you actually want to do is, create reward positive behavior. And then actually we all start doing better.
In this in-between time, sounds like you were making some pretty good money, but you were also taking care of your friends. And, that's not cheap either. When this all ended, did you spend most of your money? Did you save some? Did you invest some? And, if you're not booking work for a while, did you have any normal jobs in between? Because you went from 0 to 18, you're selling out magic shows, you're acting, you're in national commercials. Now you're in your mid 20s and you had to have like one normal job, right?
Yeah, I did. I'm trying to think back. That's funny. During that time, well, I didn't invest my money well, to answer that question. My parents were begging me, and I couldn't manage my self-care enough. I needed a financial advisor. I didn't have one. I did pay some of it off to school loans, some of it. I did go broke pretty soon after that. I had developed a lot of debt. I just had very unhealthy habits around, as you do with like self-esteem and a lot of money and access to things. I started waiting tables. I was great at that. I had a bunch of waiting tables jobs, including this place that was famous in New York City called Tortilla Flats. It's like this Mexican restaurant, hole in the wall tequila bar. And you wear whatever you want when you work there. And everyone went there to get wasted. You could drink with your customers. And I made tons of money. But people would be like, dude, why are you waiting tables?
Yeah, I bet.
Like, dude, where's my margarita? And I'd be like, I don't know. Why don't you ask, my agent and get it yourself, And it was not fun. And then Fox News called me like, we hear you're like working there. They called me at the bar and I became the tequila dude. But I got to promote my band and I was like, I don't care. I'll get online, talk about whatever I can. But I started getting fired from jobs bartending. Like that's when the substance stuff started kicking in, is when I had so much access to it. And I wasn't well. And that's really, like, I got arrested again. I had a DUI. And that's the things that sort of started waking me up. Was I had so many near-death experiences. I'm really lucky to be alive today.
Was there one particular moment that really made you, because I mean, you had some major things happen. You were on top of the world. This campaign ended. You're doing these other jobs and you're getting recognized as like, why is the Dell guy serving me a margarita? And you get DUIs, things like that. Was there one particular moment that was like, okay, that's it. That's the last thing before I get sober?
Yeah. No one wants to get sober usually. No one's like, I'm going to, grow up and be a sober person and go to meetings. And I had a lot of those moments, unfortunately, where I wanted to stop sooner. But I think the main one was I eventually couldn't keep a bartending job anymore. And so I became a dog walker and I was dog sitting for this guy in the West Village. And I had keys to all these nice apartments and all these like really intense, like neurotic show dogs. And I also occasionally helped myself to a drink in someone's apartment. Mm-hmm. And I was at this one guy's place and I'd helped myself to a drink and then my shame kicked in and I was like, ooh, I should really ask this guy. This is really expensive stuff. So I text him and he's like in Japan and he's like, can I have some? And he's like, of course, help yourself. By the way, I should say, like, there was a point where with cannabis, I couldn't stop. And I ended up going to Marijuana Anonymous, which is really helpful for me. The first thing I knew I couldn't stop was cannabis. I just couldn't. It was the reason. And it turns out it wasn't the substance. It was the me wanting to numb out and not feel.
Yeah.
That's just
check out.
Used.
Yeah.
But that was my access to recovery. But I didn't think I had a problem with alcohol. That's why I mentioned that. So suddenly I was like making a tea in the microwave and I was texting this guy. And like, before I knew it, I had already made a drink. Like I wasn't going to drink that night, but like I already had and I was going to have another one. And then he's like, help yourself. I don't even drink. I've been 25 years sober. Have the,
and you just had free reign.
What was it?
So, yeah,
the Johnny Walker Blue. And I was like, yes. And I was like sober. And it just like something hit me at that moment. I was drinking the sober man's alcohol and I was trying to be sober. And it just like the stars kind of everything hit me in the face. And I realized I had a friend at work, the bartending job, who was sober. And I asked her how she did it. And she took me to a meeting and I've never felt like more at home, unfortunately.
Yeah, sure.
Like, it took some grieving. I socialized a lot. and as you do in New York, through substances sometimes, and but the rowdy bunch of people recovered. They're still like a bunch of drug addicts and rock and roll stars. They're just not currently fucked up today. So it actually turned out to be an amazing group of people that helped me all over the world. And recovery is a great part of my life today, and a big reason why I'm in men's work now.
Cool. I wanted to ask you about that. I mean, you talked about it along the way here, but specifically, you have a podcast called Dude, You're Getting Well, and you offer Dude School. I want to hear, what do I learn at Dude School?
Hell yeah. Well, Dude School, it's on my website, bencurtis.co/dude school, or just bencurtis.co. You'll see it right there at the top. So I can't tell you, I'll never, and as I said on Dude School in our night school last night, to all the men there, as we were like having this incredibly deep, powerful, healing, like just heart exploding, awesome night together. And I said in that moment, this is literally like 24 hours ago, this is what I can't explain to people. I can't tell them what they're going to get in Dude School till they're here and we're all here together in this moment, because for each of us, it's different. And it's with 12 weeks and 12 topics. So every season I have a new Dude School coming up. The next one's Monday, May 1st. I have registration open now. So you can actually go on my website, click a link to learn more, to sign up, book a call with me. I will talk to any human out there that's interested. I am so committed to men having this work. And it's universal topics that I've seen men face, because while life is not binary, a lot of our conditioning has been binary. And so men often face a lot of the same things around shame, money, sex, compassion, family, anger. Like, how many spaces do you feel safe going to express your anger outwardly in public or even in your own home without upsetting someone else, including yourself? Right. So we develop a lot of safe spaces and time, and it's a place where I believe men can heal and grow beyond.
Well, I'm glad it all came full circle and you're able to use your real life experiences to help others. Ben, it sounds like you're in a really good place in life. If you want to learn more about Dude School and everything else Ben has going on, you can check out bencurtis.co. That's bencurtis.co. I'll also put some links in the show notes if anybody else wants to check that out. I got to ask you, though, I alluded to it earlier. Are you able to give us a magic trick?
I am. So is this a visual show or just audio?
It's both. So I guess if you're not listening, you'll have to watch online.
Yeah. Let me think of something real quick.
Wait, what? Where'd that come from?
Wow.
Okay. There can't be any more. What?
I'm sorry, I can't.
If you're not able to see this, Ben is pulling out a lot of stuff from his mouth.
Stop there. It's a good, nice homemade thing.
That's a good teaser.
With two hands, normally we could do it a lot better.
All right. Thanks for your time, Ben. I appreciate it.
One-handed magic.
If you want some more magical fun, maybe we'll put some links to some good magic tricks Ben has in the notes as well.
Yeah, they're in. Oh, if you go to my Instagram bio, there's actually a really fun little bio story thing where I do some character magic, and you'll get a little taste of my weirdness.
Awesome. Be sure to check that out. Ben, thank you so much for your time again. Appreciate you coming on the show.
Derek, thank you for having me. And thank you to everyone who's listening. I would love to know if any of this resonated. Like, please reach out to me and let me know. And if you're that dude who could use support, or you know a dude in your life, just let's talk. I'd love to have a conversation. I'm always here. Keep my doors open. You can book a call with me anytime. And Derek, thanks for having the show. You've been great. It's been a pleasure.
Okay, that's a wrap for this episode. I hope you enjoyed my interview with Ben Curtis. If you could do me one favor before we get out of here, and that's to share the show. You can find us on every social media platform. Make sure to tag us. It's at 1501 Show. Or if you're listening on a podcast, submit a review, or you're watching online, YouTube, wherever it may be, put a comment below. It all helps. Appreciate you. I will see you on the next episode.